Welcome to the Ministry of the Raw Truth and the strangest claims in regards to the origin of the Christian religion, Jesus Christ, and the Essene community at Qumran, and how supposedly religion or Christianity started. This is a book we found in the public domain, public access. So no copyright breach was intentional, and we're bringing this to you all for educational purposes alone. This book is called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross: Fertility Cults and the Origins of Judaism and Christianity by John M. Allegro. In case you don't know who he is, we have found some information on him. He was born 17th February 1923, died 17th February 1988. He was an English archaeologist and Dead Sea Scrolls scholar. He was a popularizer of the Dead Sea Scrolls through his books and radio broadcasts. He was the editor of some of the most famous and controversial scrolls published. He published the Pesharim. Pesha, from the Hebrew root meaning interpretation, is a group of interpretive commentaries on scripture. The Pesharim commentaries became known from the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Pesharim gives a theory of scriptural interpretation, etc. A number of Allegro's later books, including The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, a study of the nature and origins of Christianity within the fertility cults of the ancient Near East, a 1970s book about the linguistics of early Christianity and fertility cults in the ancient Near East, i.e. the Essene Qumran community. A number of Allegro's later books, including The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, brought him both popular fame and notoriety, and also complicated his career. Early life and training: he was born in 1923. He was in the Navy, served during World War II. After the war, he began training for the Methodist ministry, but found that he was more interested in Hebrew and Greek, so went to study at Manchester University with fees paid by government grant due to his military service. Allegro received his honours degree in Oriental Studies at the University of Manchester in 1951. This was followed in 1952 by a master's degree under supervision of H. Rowley, an English Old Testament scholar from the Baptist tradition. While engaged in further research in Hebrew dialects at Oxford under Godfrey Driver in 1953, he was an English Orientalist noted for his studies in Semitic languages and Assyriology. His father was considered the most distinguished British Hebraist of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This is Sir Godfrey Rolls Driver, known as G.R. Driver. In 1953, Allegro was invited by Gerald Lancaster Harding. CBE was a British archaeologist. Gerald Lancaster Harding, CBE, must have had some great reward there, right? Or honour bestowed upon him. Was a British archaeologist who was the director of the Department of Antiquities of Jordan from 1936 to 1956. His tenure spanned the period in which the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered and brought to public awareness. So this guy was invited by General Lancaster Harding to join the team of scholars working on the Dead Sea Scrolls in Jerusalem, where he spent 1 year working on the scrolls. He became a lecturer in comparative Semitic philology in Manchester in 1954, so he had a lot of qualification expertise behind him. The Copper Scroll. It was on Allegro's recommendation in 1955 that the Copper Scroll 3Q15 is one of the Dead Sea Scrolls found in Cave 3 near Kerbet, Qumran, but differs significantly from the others. Whereas the other scrolls are written on parchment or papyrus, this scroll is written on metal, copper mixed, etc. So he recommends sending this copper scroll to, he was sent it. It was on Allegro's recommendation in 1955 that the copper scroll was sent by the Jordanian government to Manchester University in order for it to be cut into sections, allowing the text to be read. He was present during the cutting process in 1956 and later made a preliminary transcription of the text, which he soon translated, sending copies of his work back to Gerald Lancaster, Harding and Jordan. Although Allegro had been first to translate the copper scroll, the text was assigned for editing to J.T. Milik, a Polish biblical scholar and a Catholic priest researcher of the Dead Sea Scrolls, DSS, through the deserts of Judea, Jordan, and translator and editor of the Book of Enoch in the Aramaic, the fragments. Okay, so he was assigned for editing to J.T. Milik by Roland Deveau, a French Dominican priest who led the Catholic team that initially worked on the Dead Sea Scrolls. He was the director of the École Biblique, a French Catholic theological school in East Jerusalem. He was charged with, if we remember rightly, if this is the same guy, he was sent in by the Roman Catholics to keep an eye on the translation project and probably let them know, because we remember doing research or coming across the stuff where they were worried about, oh no, they're going to translate this Dead Sea Scrolls that they found. What if it says something completely different to what we're pushing? I know we can't have that, because people will believe them in their thousands and their money will go with them. So they're like, basically sent this certain priest or vicar there to keep an eye on it. So it might be this guy, and report back to them. We're not too sure if it actually is this guy, but it sounds like he's of a Catholic team, so yeah, maybe it was. Okay, he was the editor-in-chief of the Scrolls. While he was in England, he made a series of radio broadcasts on BBC Radio, almost popularising the Scrolls, in which he announced that the leader discussed in the Scrolls may have been crucified. He posited that the teacher of righteousness had been martyred and crucified by Alexander Jannaeus. And then his followers believed he would reappear at the end time as Messiah, based on Qumran document commentary on Nahum. A Nahum commentary or Pesha Nahum, labelled 4QP or 4Q169, was among the Dead Sea Scrolls in Cave 4 of Qumran that was discovered in August 1952. The Etio Princeps of the text is to be found in DJD5, edited by John Allegro. 1.49, a position that he reiterated in 1986. His colleagues in Jerusalem immediately responded with a letter to the Times on 16 March 1956 refuting his claim. The letter concluded, "It is our conviction that either he, Allegro, has misread the text or he has built up a chain of conjectures which the materials do not support." One result of this letter seemed to be that his appointment at Manchester was not to be renewed. However, in July, after several uneasy months, the appointment was renewed. Allegro was asked a number of times by the Jordanian Director of Antiquities if he would publish the text of the Copper Scroll. After a few years of waiting for Milik's publication of the scroll, Allegro succumbed and set about publishing the text. His book, The Treasure of the Copper Scroll, was released in 1960, while the official publication had to wait another 2 years. Although several of his readings in the text are acknowledged, Allegro's book was disparaged by his colleagues. He believed that the treasure in the scroll was real, a view not held by most scholars, and led an expedition to attempt to find items mentioned in the scroll, though without success. During this period, Allegro also published two popular books on Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls, 1956. We are not too sure if this is the one we have here. This one's by A. Powell Davies. And the People of Dead Sea Scrolls, 1958. He was keen to photograph the site of Qumran and various texts, providing an important source of information for posterity. Publishing the Pisharim. Allegro was entrusted with the publication of 4Q158 to 4Q186. a collection of fragments which mainly contain exemplars of a unique kind of commentary on biblical works known as Pesharim or Pesharim. Pesha, from the Hebrew root meaning interpretation, is a group of interpretive commentaries on Scripture. The Pesharim commentaries became known from the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It gave a theory of scriptural interpretation, probably on a number of subjects. He believed that it was necessary to get these works out as quickly as possible, and published several preliminary editions in learned journals during the late 1950s. He told DeVoe that he could have a share of the text ready in 1960, but due to hold-ups, he had to wait until 1968 for his volume, Discoveries in the Judaism Desert of Jordan, 5, 4Q158 to 4Q186, to be published. He reworked his material in 1966 with the assistance of a Manchester colleague, Arnold Anderson, before publication. He stated in the volume that it has been my practice to offer no more than the basic essentials of photographs, translation of non-biblical passages where this might serve some useful interpretive purpose, and the minimum of textual notes. John Strugnell published a severe critique of the volume. He's put this in French. Discoveries in Judean Desert of Jordan, a review to Qumran. Allegro's minimalist approach has received widespread scorn in the scholarly world, which nevertheless had the opportunity to analyse the Allegro text for decades while waiting for other editors to publish their allotments. The first part of Strugnell's allotment was published in 1994. Change of direction. As early as 1956, Allegro had controversial views regarding the content of the scrolls, stating in a letter to DeVoe, "It's a pity that you and your friends cannot conceive of anything written about Christianity without trying to grind some ecclesiastical or non-ecclesiastical acts." The bulk of his work on the Dead Sea Scrolls was done in 1960, or by 1960, and he was at odds with the Scrolls colleagues. When a conflict broke out with H.H. Rowley concerning Allegro's interpretation of the Scrolls, Allegro, on the invitation of F.F. Bruce, he went from H.H. to F.F. Frederick Fyvie Bruce, usually cited as F.F. Bruce, was Ryland's professor of biblical criticism and exegesis at the University of Manchester from 1959 until 1978, and one of the most influential evangelical scholars of the second half of the 20th century. So he moved from the Department of Near East Studies in the Faculty of Arts in Manchester to the Faculty of Theology. It was during his stay in theology that he wrote his controversial book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, whose subtitle was A Study of the Nature and Origins of Christianity Within the Fertility Cults of the Ancient Near East. Apparently realising the impact this book would have, Allegro resigned his post at Manchester. The Sacred Mushroom and Christian Myth. Allegro's book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, 1970, argued that Christianity began as a shamanistic cult. In his books The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Christian Myth, 1979, Allegro put forward the theory that stories of early Christianity originated in an Essene clandestine cult. The Essenes were a mystic Jewish sect during the Second Temple period that flourished from the 2nd century BCE to the 1st century CE. Okay, it's an Essene clandestine cult centered around the use of psychedelic mushrooms. And that's a temporary altered state of consciousness induced by the consumption of a psychedelic substance. For example, an acid trip is a psychedelic experience brought on by the use of LSD. And then it compares it with the mushroom one. And that the New Testament is the coded record of the shamanistic cult. Allegro further argued that the authors of the Christian Gospels did not understand the Essene thought. When writing down the Gospels based on the stories they had heard, the evangelists confused the meaning of the scrolls. In this way, according to Allegro, the Christian tradition is based on misunderstanding of the scrolls. He also argued that the story of Jesus was based on the crucifixion of the teacher of righteousness in the scrolls. Mark Hall writes that Allegro suggested that the Dead Sea Scrolls are all but proved that a historical Jesus never existed. Allegro argued that Jesus in the Gospels was in fact a code for a type of hallucinogen. the Amanita muscaria, and that Christianity was the product of an ancient sex and mushroom cult. Critical reaction was swift and harsh. 14 British scholars, including Allegro's mentor at Oxford, Godfrey Driver, denounced it. Sidney White Crawford wrote of the publication of Sacred Mushroom, rightly or wrongly, Allegro would never be taken seriously as a scholar again. Allegro's theory of a shamanistic cult as the origin of Christianity was criticised sharply by Welsh historian Philip Jenkins, who wrote that Allegro was an eccentric scholar who relied on texts that did not exist in quite the form he was citing them. Jenkins called Sacred Mushroom and the Cross possibly the single most ludicrous book on Jesus scholarship by a qualified academic. Based on the reactions to the book, Allegro's publisher later apologised for issuing the book, and Allegro was forced to resign his academic post. A 2006 article by Michael Hoffman discussing Allegro's work called for his theories to be re-evaluated by the mainstream. In November 2009, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross was reprinted in the 40th anniversary edition with a 30-page addendum by Carl Rook of Boston University. He died in Belasala on the Isle of Man before returning to live in England in 1988. He died of a heart attack on his 65th birthday. His obituarist in the Daily Telegraph, Hugh Massingbird, English journalist and genealogist, described him as the Liberace of biblical scholarship. Remember this guy? Liberace, great at playing the piano, but supposedly secretly gay. Might have seen the Michael Douglas movie. Get his works. Or maybe he was openly, can't remember. He's a brilliant piano player though. Brilliant. He's like the Prior, Elton John. Yeah, Elton John was pretty good as well. He's a good piano player. You're going to go back and look at this particular book. Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, John M. Allegro. Fertility cults and the origins of Judaism and Christianity. Were the visions of ancient prophets really drug-induced hallucinations? What are the symbolic implications of our religious rituals? Did a man named Jesus really live? These are just a few of the startling questions raised by this truly revolutionary book, a work by a noted authority on ancient languages, who reveals here a dramatic discovery likely to change our entire view of the Bible and its teachings. After more than 14 years of painstaking research, John M. Allegro has succeeded in tracing the origins of today's religious traditions among the primitive fertility, rites and mystery cults of the Near East, especially among the worshippers of the sacred mushroom Amanita muscaria. The key to these discoveries is Allegro's conclusive proof of the connection between the languages of the Bible, of biblical. Here we're going to get right to the end here to see that back jacket. Times and ancient Sumerian, the oldest known written language. Using the link, he has been able to decipher for the first time the true meaning of the sacred names and incantations of the New Testament, the Old Testament, and much of classical mythology as well. These discoveries bring new clarity and significance to many previously obscure stories and aphorisms, and at the same time cast serious doubt on many widely accepted beliefs, in particular the value of the Bible as an historical record. Compellingly argued, thoroughly documented, and clearly written, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross is a brilliant, original, disturbing work that requires a complete re-examination of our ideas about the ancient world, and that will surely make its impact felt for years to come. And here's his qualifications. John M. Allegro, a lecturer in Old Testament and intertestamental studies at the University of Manchester. He was appointed the first British representative on an international editing team currently preparing the Dead Sea Scrolls for publication, and the Penguin edition of his book on the scrolls, well, he's long gone, has sold over 250,000 copies and been translated into 8 languages. Here is the Amanita muscaria, photographed by John M. Allegro. The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, a study of the nature and origins of Christianity within the fertility cults of the ancient Near East, by John M. Allegro. Author's note: this book is the first published statement of the fruits of some years' work of a largely philological nature. It presents a new appreciation of the relationship of the languages of the ancient world and the implication of this advance for our understanding of the Bible and of the origins of Christianity. It will be appreciated that such a statement has to be furnished with the technical data, even though much of it must be outside the scope of the general reader for whom the book is primarily intended. In order to leave the text as uncovered as possible, these notes have been gathered in the body at the end of the book, and a numbered references within the text may be safely ignored by the non-specialist. And we have a video we found on YouTube. The renowned Joe Rogan. Okay, at the beginning of it, he does cuss a bit, but he basically says there that John M. Allegro was not a drug addict or a user of mushrooms, all this sort of stuff. You can go watch that in your own time, at your own leisure. Acknowledgements. Quotations from the Revised Standard Version of the Bible, copyrighted 1952 and 1956, are used by permission. Quotations from the Homeric hymns, etc. Here's the contents page. Illustrations. Colour plates. Amanita muscaria, a Christian fresco showing the Amanita muscaria as the tree of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, etc., etc. Introduction. No one religion in the ancient Near East can be studied in isolation. All stem from man's first questioning about the origin of life and how to ensure his own survival. He has always been acutely conscious of his insufficiency. However much he progressed technically, making clothes, shelter, conserving food and water supplies, and so on, the forces of nature were always greater than he. The winds would blow away his shelter, the sun parts his crops, wild beasts prey on his animals. He was always on the defensive in a losing battle. Out of the sense of dependency and frustration, religion was born. Somehow man had to establish communications with the source of the world's fertility, and thereafter maintain a right relationship with it. Over the course of time, he built up a body of experiential knowledge, of rituals that he or his representatives could perform, or words to recite, which were reckoned to have the greatest influence on this fertility deity. At first, they were largely imitative. If rain in the desert lands was the source of life, then the moisture from heaven must be only a more abundant kind of spermatozoa. If the male organ ejaculated this precious fluid and made life in the woman, then he carries on about that. It followed, therefore, that to induce the heavenly phallus, etc., etc. However far man progressed in his control of the world about him, there remained a large gap between what he wanted at any one time and what he could achieve on his own account. There was always some unscalable mountain, some branch of knowledge which remained unpenetrable, some disease with no known cure. It seemed to him that if he had managed painstakingly to grope his way into a knowledge and dexterity so far above the animals, then in some mysterious way his thinkers and artisans must have been tapping a source of wisdom no less real than the rain that fructified the ground. The seed of God was the word of God. The dream of man is to become God. Then he would be omnipotent, no longer fearful of the snows in winter or the sun in summer, or the drought that killed his cattle and made his children's bellies swell grotesquely, and so forth. He says here, God is jealous of his power and his knowledge. He brooks no rivals in heavenly places. If in his mercy he will allow just a very few of his chosen mortals to share his divinity, it is but for a fleeting moment. Under very special circumstances, he will permit men to rise to the throne of heaven and glimpse the beauty and the glory of omniscience and omnipotence. For those who are so privileged, there has seemed no greater or more worthwhile experience. The colours are brighter, the sounds more penetrating, every sensation is magnified, every natural force exaggerated. For such a glimpse of heaven, many have died. In the pursuit of this goal, great religions have been born, shone as a beacon to men struggling still in their unequal battle with nature, and then to have died, stifled by their own attempts to perpetuate, codify, and evangelize the mystic vision. Okay, it makes you think, okay, all these kind of mushrooms, plants, and all that sort of stuff, why are they there? Okay. Is this, like, say, scripturally, where Adam, etc., Adam and Eve were told, you're not to eat of this, you can eat anything in the garden, but don't touch this. Could it be like that? You know? And man says, oh, okay. Tempted, and he does it, he tripped out. Okay. It could be, that could be it. You know, it's a possibility. You know, it makes you think, again, why are those kind of things there? Why is mushrooms, these kind of mushrooms there? Okay. Deadly and dangerous. Why is ganja or marijuana there? You know? Etc., etc. A lot of people have thought this over. Why has he provided it? If he didn't want anyone to have it, why was it part of nature? Okay, a lot of people say, oh, it's the devil weed, the devil mushroom, whatever. But what we're trying to say here is, obviously, if God created everything, okay, the devil had no part in that creation, did he? As far as we know. He didn't create that mushroom, he didn't create that weed. So that's the question you've got to ask, why is it there? Okay, and also if you look at the very, very old churches in England, Scotland, etc., those glass stained windows, you'll see that they have a lot of depictions or pictures, images of these mushrooms on them. Right? Why are they on there? Ask yourself that. Why are they on there? Could they not have put something else? You know, a different kind of mushroom? The one that you can actually eat? Your common mushroom? Which is just basically a fungi anyway. Couldn't they have put something else there? Did they have to specifically put that one? And so forth. The present concern of this particular author was to show that Judaism and Christianity are such cultic expressions of this endless pursuit by man to discover instant power and knowledge. Granted the first proposition, that the vital forces of nature are controlled by an extraterrestrial intelligence, these religions are logical developments from the older, cruder fertility cults. With the advance of technical proficiency, the aims of religious ritual became less to influence the weather and the crops than to attain wisdom and the knowledge of the future. The word that seeped through the labia of the earth's womb became the mystic of less importance than the logos, which he believed his religion enabled him to apprehend and enthuse him with divine omniscience. But the source was the same vital power of the universe, and the cultic practice differed little. To raise the crop, the farmer copulated with his he worked with his wife in the fields. To seek the drug that would send the soul winging to the seventh heaven and back, the initiates into the religious mysteries had their priestesses seduce the god and draw him into their grasp, etc., etc. For the way to God and the fleeting view of heaven was through plants more plentifully endued than any other. These were the drug herbs, the science of whose cultivation and use had been accumulated over centuries of observation and dangerous experiment. Those who had the secret wisdom of the plants were the chosen of their God. To them alone had he vouched the privilege of access to the heavenly throne. And if he was jealous of his power, no less were those who served him in the cultic mysteries. Theirs was no gospel to those who served him in the cultic mysteries. Theirs was no gospel to be sheltered from the rooftops. Paradise was for none but the favoured few. The incantations and rites by which they conjured forth their drug plants, and the details of the bodily and mental preparations undergone before they could ingest their god, were the secrets of the cult to which none but the initiate, bound by fearful oaths, had access. Very rarely, and then only for urgent practical purposes, were those secrets ever committed to writing. Normally they would be passed from the priest to the initiate by word of mouth. Dependent for their accurate transmission on the trained memories of men dedicated to the learning and recitation of the scriptures. But if, for some drastic reason like the destruction of the occultic centres by war or persecution, it became necessary to write down the precious names of the herbs and the manner of their use and accompanying incantations, it would be in some esoteric form, comprehensible only to those within their dispersed communities. Such an occasion, we believe, or the author believed, was the Jewish revolt of AD 66, instigated probably by members of the cult, swayed by their drug-induced madness to believe God had called them to master the world in His name. They provoked the mighty power of Rome to swift and terrible action. Jerusalem was ravaged, her temple destroyed, Judaism was disrupted, and the people driven to seek refuge with communities already established around the Mediterranean coastlands. Because these, what it's referring to as these Essene, Essenes of this Qumran community had these apocalypse theories, end of the world theories, all this sort of stuff. They lived in this certain area and they disliked the temple Pharisees, Sadducees, because they're basically under the foot of the Romans. They thought they were suck-ups, right, to get what they wanted. So they thought, well, we're going to rise up one day and we're going to take it back and all this sort of stuff. But before they did, they were wiped out by the Romans. They started something, then the Romans went there and wiped them out, which might have led to the temple at Jerusalem being destroyed, the Church of Jerusalem, etc. It may have started there first, and then it may have gone into the mountains in Qumran and destroyed them as well. You have to do the research and establish that fact, those facts, to find evidence that proves that evident. Okay, such an occasion, the author believed, was the Jewish revolt of AD 66, instigated probably by members of the cult, swayed by their drug-induced madness to believe God had called them to master the world in His name. They provoked the mighty power of Rome to swift and terrible action. Jerusalem was ravaged, her temple destroyed. Judaism was disrupted, and her people driven to seek refuge with communities already established around the Mediterranean coastlands. The mystery cults found themselves without the essential fount of authority, with many of their priests killed in the abortive rebellion or driven into the desert. The secrets, if they were not to be lost forever, had to be committed to writing, and yet if found, the documents must give nothing away or betray those who still dared defy the Roman authorities and continue their religious practices. The means of conveying the information were at hand and had been for thousands of years. The folk tales of the ancients had from the earliest times contained myths based upon the personification of plants and trees. They were invested with human faculties and qualities, and their names and physical characteristics were applied to the heroes and heroines of the stories. Some of these were just tales spun for entertainment, others were political parables, like Jotham's fable about the trees in the Old Testament, while others were means of remembering and transmitting therapeutic folklore. The names of the plants were spun out to make the basis of the stories, whereby the creatures of fantasy were identified, dressed, and made to enact their parts. Here, then, was a literary device to spread occult knowledge to the faithful, to tell the story of a rabbi called Jesus, and invest him with the power and names of the magic drug, to have him live before the terrible events that had disrupted their lives, to preach a love between men, extending even to the hated Romans. Thus, reading such a tale, should it fall into Roman hands, even their mortal enemies might be deceived and not probe farther into the activities of the cells of the mystery cults within their territories. The ruse failed. Christians, hated and despised, were hauled forth and slain in their thousands. The cult well nigh perished. What eventually took its place was a travesty of the real thing, a mockery of the power that could raise men to heaven and give them the glimpse of God for which they had gladly died. The story of the rabbi crucified at the instigation of the Jews became an historical peg upon which the new cult's authority was founded. What began as a hoax became a trap, even to those who believed themselves to be the spiritual ears of the mystery religion, and took to themselves the name of Christian. This is all according to this particular author Allegro. Above all, they forgot or purged from their cult in their memories the one supreme secret on which their whole religious and ecstatic experience depended, the names and identity of the source of the drug, the key to heaven, the sacred mushroom. The fungus, recognized today as the Amanita muscaria, or fly agaric, has been known from the beginning of history. Beneath the skin of its characteristic red and white spotted cap, there is concealed a powerful hallucinatory poison. Its religious use among certain Siberian peoples and others has been the subject of study in recent years, and its exhilarating and depressive effects have been clinically examined. These include the stimulation of the perceptive faculties so that the subject sees objects much greater or much smaller than they really are. Colours and sounds are much enhanced, and there is a general sense of power, both physical and mental, quite outside the normal range of human experience. The mushroom has always been a thing of mystery. The ancients were puzzled by its manner of growth without seed, the speed with which it made its appearance after rain, and its as rapid disappearance, born from a vulval egg, etc., etc. Every aspect of the mushroom's existence was fraught with illusions, sexual illusions, and so forth. To pluck such a precious herb was attended at every point with peril. The time before sunrise, the words to be uttered, the name of the guardian angel, were vital to the operation. But more was needed. Some form of substitution was necessary to make an atonement to the earth, robbed of her offspring. Yet such was the divine nature of the holy plant, as it was called, only the God could make the necessary sacrifice. To redeem the Son, the Father had to supply even the price of redemption. These are all phrases used of the sacred mushroom, as they are of the Jesus of Christianity theology. No wonder this got him in trouble. The present study has much to do with names and titles. Only when it can be discovered that the nomenclature of the sacred fungus within and without the cult can we begin to understand its function and theology. The main factor that has made these new discoveries possible has been the realization that many of the most secret names of the mushroom go back to ancient Sumerian, the oldest written language known to us, witnessed by cuneiform texts dating from the 4th millennium BC.